Diaspora Hybrid Conference, and also streaming live on the AAU TV satellite broadcast transmission. From Tuesday, where it began on 30th August, to today has been streaming live. So AAU TV, thank you very much for your very, very solid backup on taking this very wonderful conference out there on a platform. So today, you're all welcome as we begin with the opening plenary sessions, and then we will break later on to our parallel session. So if you have your program with you, those online, you're all welcome. If you refer to your program, you realize that this morning, right at 11 o'clock GMT on the dot, is a special session on science journalism, which will be held by Ms. Ogechi Ekianyanwu, Regional Coordinator, Sub-Saharan Africa, ScienceDev.net. So put your hands together for her. She makes her way up. We can do it. Put your hands together for her, please. Ms. Ogechi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this plenary session. We're talking about science journalism and the role of science journalism in furthering science. So my name is Ogechi Ekeanyawo. I'm here with my colleague, Jackie Okpara, and we work with SciDevNet, which is one of the foremost leading science platform, science newspaper. And basically what we do is to try to promote science stories, science for global development. So we go on to the next slide. So why science journalism, basically? It can be cliche to talk about journalism and the role of journalists in the society, but we need to say that good journalism will keep people informed, educated about events and situations, and help people make informed decisions as well. So this role cannot be underplayed or underemphasized. We'll keep talking about the role of journalists, and particularly good journalism, and in this case, science journalism. And so as we talk about science journalism, we'll just like to explain a little bit the reason science journalism is important and its essence in the society. Well, we'll say that science journalism or science can no longer be ignored, basically. We can no longer say it's the exclusive preserve of academics in higher institutions, or something that, you know, a group of people talk about or research or engage in and tuck away in journals without publicity or understanding of the work or research that they've done. So in that regard, we understand that at SciDev, and basically what science journalism understands is that the knowledge that scientists have, that they've engaged in, the work that they've done, needs to be democratized to impact society positively. And we already know that there's no underemphasizing what scientists do, the research that they do, the work that they do, the innovation, the solutions that they provide to societal problems through science, through evidence-based work. And these work that they do, that they engage in, are very key to social, economic, and cultural development generally in the world. We can see that if science communication is engaged in the way that that should happen, if scientists work with communicators, with journalists, that they could shape policies. They could influence people's lives and development globally. And so this is why it's so important for us at SciDev, where we work, to do science journalism in a way that is verifiable, that people can look through the work that scientists do, because we often include links to the research, and engage scientists and the work that they do, so that we are able to promote science and research and the work that scientists do, to give it visibility, to influence policies positively. So the next slide, please. So why do we need to hear from scientists, especially in this dispensation of the internet and proliferation of knowledge and information? And then I'll just say, first of all, that the internet can be a double-edged sword. When we, especially particularly when we speak about information, with the advent of the internet, knowledge is democratized, information can be shared so easily, can spread widely and wildly, in fact. And so because of this knowledge, because we now know that information, whether false or true, are the tips of our fingers, then we must ensure that what we do, that there are credible websites or credible science platforms that you can go to verify or to find out what the true science is. And that's what we do at SciDev. So we know that it's important to work with scientists. So that's why at our organization, our stories, our articles, our news articles are often in collaboration with scientists. We speak to the scientists, we speak to the researchers about the work that they do, about their areas of expertise, and they let us know what the true picture of events as they unfold, for instance, COVID, monkeypox, are. And so because we know that misinformation and disinformation can spread widely and then really fast as well and via social media, it is important for us to, or for the society generally, to have veritable sources of information. And we know that when fake news spreads, people's lives are put at risk, and generally it's a net negative. So we also understand that when this happens, resources are spent, resources are wasted, in fact, to correct the misinformation and address the consequences, resources that could be better utilized. So this is the reason that we know we have to work with scientists and we have to hear from them about the work that they do. And so the cost of fake news. We'll go on to the next slide. In 2014, yes, when there was the outbreak of Ebola in Nigeria, for instance, and a lot of other countries in West Africa, but particularly Nigeria, because there was an outbreak that we were trying to contain. We heard about how Ebola could be cured by drinking hot water and by bathing with hot water. And at that time, several people, in fact, it was mass hysteria. People, would consume salt and bath with salt, just in a way that wasn't healthy for them. And this led to, of course, dire consequences, to deaths and then a lot of hospitalizations. Also, with the advent of COVID 2020 and the news that chloroquine and hydrochloroquine could treat COVID, the drugs were emptied from shelves in stores. And then there's this particular disease, lupus, that hydrochloroquine and chloroquine is used to treat. Unfortunately, these drugs were no longer in shelves, and people with lupus began to, there was scarcity of the drugs for their treatment. There was also the case that people were buying this in bulk and consuming them in inordinate amounts, and so they were falling sick, and it was also, they also had dire consequences from the fake news of fake treatments, news of treatments that weren't exactly real. And so that's why we need scientists to share the work that they do with people, with journalists, with professionals who can communicate their ideas or the work that they do in understandable, readable manner, so that basically anyone, even a 16-year-old, can go through the news and understand what's going on. Yeah, so we'll go on to the next slide. So just reiterating why scientists need to share. We understand that their work needs to become visible. We understand that they need to build their profile in sub-Saharan Africa and internationally generally. For SciDevNet, while we have the sub-Saharan Africa edition, we also have a global edition, and we reach basically all parts of all continents of the world. So we do want the work of scientists to become visible. We want credible work out there. So it's important. Thank you. It also enables scientists to contribute to public knowledge. And then it helps their work gain relevance, because, I mean, the observation is that there's so much work talked in journals that sometimes under paywall, and nobody has access to them. And in those journals, those papers are solutions to all kinds of challenges that nobody hears about. And so that's where that's where we're relevant, or that's where we come in, because we can then reach out to the scientists, talk to them about the work that they do, the solutions that they provide, and put it out there for anyone to read. Because one thing that we are focused on, or one thing that we try to do at SciDev that is important to us, very key to us, or to the work that we do, is putting out the science in understandable, readable format. And so also when this work is out there, it reaches several people, the public, policymakers, non-governmental NGOs, government, and just leaders generally. And then what that does is help that work that you've created to contribute to policy making, to influencing decisions that are taken for the betterment of people generally. So just a little bit about SciDev on the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said earlier, it is a leading source of news and analysis about science for global development. So one thing to emphasize is that there's science, but when science is not applied, then there's no development. And then science is just that. It's just theories. There's nothing to it. And so what we try to do is present that science that everyone needs to see, so that it can influence global development. It's our mission to use independent journalism to help individuals and organizations apply science to decision-making, to drive equitable, sustainable development and poverty reduction, because our platform is independent. It is free from advertisement. So we try to ensure that what we put there is not influenced by a cohort of people trying to, influence what is the fact. So we'll go on to the next slide. And so at the Sub-Saharan Africa edition, where I belong, where I work as the regional coordinator, we are solely concerned with centering the voices of African scientists. I think this is why we're here, because it falls very much in line with the agenda of this conference, basically, which is to decolonize education. And at the SciDevNet, what is important to us is to hear from African scientists. We know how important it is to tell our own stories by ourselves, written by African journalists, speaking to the scientists who understand the terrain that they work in. They understand the peculiar situations that Africans are dealing with and the peculiar challenges that we need science and technology to solve. It's very important to us at the Sub-Saharan Africa edition to center the voices of scientists in our region. So basically to understand the astounding work that they produce, again, often talked in journals where no one reads, oftentimes just your peers are reading, but the people whose lives will be impacted by the work that you do don't have access to it. And so just finding out bringing out these solutions that are important and are tailor-made for Africans is important to us at SciDev. And so we'll go on to the next slide, and then it will be about the cost of not following the science, which is really important to speak about, because as I said earlier, we can see it's measurable. It's not an abstract to say that when you don't follow the science, lives are affected. People die, in fact. And it takes a lot of work to undo the consequences of not following the science. But also, we'll just go on to talk about the benefits of centering African scientists. And then we can talk, for instance, we now see that the world is really a global village, and it's so interconnected, so interdependent that we can't operate in an isolation again. And at SciDevNet, we had a few stories where we spoke to scientists who were dealing with the outbreak of monkeypox. And we found basically that they were being sought after for collaborations and to lead research on monkeypox because they had dealt with the situation earlier. They knew the symptoms, manifestations, how to treat the symptoms of monkeypox. And they had detailed and thorough management resources that weren't available in other regions. And so they were sought after. And so we did a few stories to reflect the work and the importance of African scientists, particularly in a world that has become interdependent and is so interconnected. So you will see, for instance, some of the reports that are there, these links will be available, where we talk about what we must do to curb monkeypox before a more viral spread happens. We also talk about how it was important for WHO to announce, to declare monkeypox a disease of global concern. And then we also talked about the importance of African scientists in the management of monkeypox globally. So we'll go on to the next slide. Oh, sorry, that's the next one. So we'll go on to the next one, which is, we talk about Africa Science Podcast, which is another of our offerings at SciDevNet. And this is another tool, basically, which helps us further the agenda of helping the society apply science to solving problems and to help decision-making. What we wanted to do with Africa Science Podcast, because this is basically, it's not text. We wanted to make our content accessible to everyone who can listen. If you weren't able to read, we just basically wanted an accessible means of getting science out there. And so we came up with Africa Science Podcast in 2020, Africa Science Focus Podcast in 2020. And the vision for us, the next slide, please. The vision for us was to create a show, a podcast that, the next slide. Thank you. Was to create a podcast that gave African scientists the opportunity to talk about the science that they do within their communities. And we will pair a scientist or several scientists in an episode with a reporter, and the reporters give them the opportunity to understand what needs to be solved locally in the community. So our podcast episodes discuss research, new findings, interviews, and all of these are geared towards science for development. It's also important for us to say that we want to work with scientists at SciDev. It's our goal to deepen the relationship between African scientists and journalists, because we want to own our narrative in sub-Saharan Africa. It's important for us, again, very, very important for us to center the voices of African scientists. We don't want people speaking over us. We want to hear what is obtainable in the region, and we want to hear homegrown solutions using the vast resources that we have to solve the problems that bedevil us. So that's why we created Africa Science Focus, and that's the whole essence of SciDevNet, Sub-Saharan Africa, in essence. Yeah, so we'll take questions, comments, and observations if there are any. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for an insightful presentation. I saw Kabi and I got interested because I contributed a book chapter for Forum on quality assurance, and the book was published by Kabi. But I'm following up on a personal level to say, so are we supposed to pay in order to publish with Kabi, or what are the modalities for one to do the publication there? Because I'm still looking forward to now say, can I write my own book now that my book chapter has been successful in another full book? There was another question. Can I ask one at a time? Oh, okay, so I'm also asking about open access. When I look at Kabi, I write my book and then you publish it. I want to hear all these things. Am I supposed to pay, or it's going to be published and it will be open access? What are the things that are involved there? But I'm just glad when to see that Kabi is being represented here. Thank you. My name is Dr. Violet Makuku. I'm a quality assurance specialist at the AAU and workshops coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So SciDev.net is our parent company. Even though we are together, our positions are different. So what we're going to do is to take your questions and then get back to them. Then I'll take your contacts, then I'll an email address, send them your questions, and they will contact you directly. All right. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My question is not really a question, something for me to know about this new development organization that, just like Dr. Makuku said, that are we sending our article paper, all those ones free? Even some, we realize that in the open access, they ask us to pay little money. Can we do that? Is it easier for we researchers?
Are you saying that you want to send, you want your paper to be published? So is it free? I'm not sure. So we will find out and get back to you. However, if you have a paper that's new, recent, you can send it to SciDev, which is the news arm of Kabi, right? It's a subsidiary. It's basically part of Kabi. It's an arm in Kabi. And if you send that to us, we would reach out to a journalist, pair you with a journalist who would come to you, interview you based on the work that you've done in that research, and put it out, and that is free to consume. In fact, we encourage people to republish our articles so that it's widely spread. Yes, absolutely. We would include that in, we'll share that, but also we would, Jackie, please, would you help send them an email so they can put it on the screen and it's available to everyone? Yeah. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Atse Martial. I am a general coordinator of African Network of Young Researchers. I am a PhD student of Pan-African University. I have two questions. Does your journal have scientific or reading committee? This is my first question. My second question, I have already read online article from your journal, and I have noticed that most of the articles are in English. My question isn't the language is which you publish in your entrance to research on French speaking was as well as research of the African and Madagascar Council of Higher Education? Thank you for.
Thank you for that question. We do have Sub-Saharan Africa Francophone, I'm not in charge of that. He isn't here. I will share his contact with you. So you can reach out to him. We have numerous research published in the Sub-Saharan African Francophone edition. And yes, there you would find French research articles published for free to publish as well. You can reuse, reshare. That's fine. I hope that answers the second question. The first one, I didn't get that clearly, but maybe I could.
Does your journal have a scientific or reading committee?
Reviewers.
For Kabi, that should be for Kabi. Yes, Kabi does.
Something reading committee. That's the
Review committee. Yes, they do. But as I said, Kabi there's a journal and then there's the news website. I represent the news website. The person who will be able to speak to what you're asking for, the question that you're asking about, isn't here right now. However, we'll take your contact and provide you the answer that you need. But we do have a review panel, and yes, we have that. But we are not the journal, we are a news website. And there's Kabi as well. And then there's SIDEM, which is just a part of Kabi.
Good morning. My name is Petrida Ijumba. I'm a retired officer. I used to work at Medical Research Council in South Africa. I just want to ask, I also was responsible for the publication of South African Health Review for 5 years. The major challenge which we faced is sharing information at that level was stepping on the foot of the politicians, because not all good news is good news in health. Some are very challenging. So how do you navigate that area of not stepping on the politicians and publishing the information with the community's need?
Oh, that's a tough question, but I will try to answer just because it's very similar challenges that we face as journalists. We wonder, how do we not step on the toes of government officials? And I don't know, that answer it's not clear cut. I would always say public good, it's basically, once I think of public good, every other thing is secondary. We will step on the toes. How do we manage it? I'm not sure. I don't know if I have the answer, because it's sort of like an age-long answer. If you're going to engage in public good, in works that have to do with public good, you will step on, they will not always be good news. But I think if we came across as also, so something new that has come up in journalism, it's not that new, but we talk about solution journalism. If we focused or we put our information across to the public or to the government as not trying to malign them, but to present solutions to the problems that bedevil us, that might be a way to go about it. But I don't think I have a clear-cut answer to that, because even as journalists, we keep the investigations. It's not even just government. It's that sometimes when you're unraveling certain things, you will step on toes. But if it's for public good, then I think that it's the greatest good. That's basically what I would say. It's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And maybe if we put that in our mind as we put out our work, it can help us deal with the chaos of having to step on toes of people. Okay. Okay, are there questions online? If there are questions that you'd like to, I think perhaps there are several questions in the chat box. I'm not sure. Questions or comments? Okay, so how your organization make contact? Okay. So warm greetings from Oshobo, Nigeria. This is Dr. Ebenezer Ajayi, and he says he enjoys evidence-based science communication. Thank you, Dr. Ebenezer. We'll be putting out our contact, and you can reach us with your most recent research, and we will definitely be reaching out to you. I'm not sure the other question I'm not sure about, so it's not clear. Okay, I think, so we'll just have our contact details on the screen. And I think that's basically it for today for our presentation. We'll share our contact details again, and we're willing to, again, to say that we're willing to work with scientists, and we're willing to basically help break down the complex subjects that science can be, and put out the good work that you do at SciDevNet. It's also important to say that as scientists, it's important to make yourselves available, because the work that you do is for public good, and it cannot be, we can't get it stuck in journals. So thank you very much. So yes, that's those are our contact details. Jackie Okpara, who is the deputy regional editor of SciDev, and then Ogechi, that's me, regional coordinator of SciDev. Please reach out to us. We'll be willing to hear from you, ready to hear from you, and ready to take your work. Thank you. Okay, we have one more question. Hafiz Hanafi. Okay, Hafiz. So you can unmute, and then Hafiz.
Oh,
to you.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hi,
Thank you
Hafiz.
for, good afternoon for the wonderful speech. And I find this session very insightful. This is a kind of a request. I don't know. I think it will be easier for journalists reporting science-related stories if they can have contacts of scientists across the continent. I mean, on the continent. You know, speaking to the same person almost all the time doesn't give much credibility compared to when you sample different opinions of scientists on a particular subject you are reporting on. So I don't know, this is a kind of request. I don't know if there is a provision for it already. Is it possible to have a pool of contacts where one can reach out to scientists in across the African countries? Okay,
We do have a poll. We have a list of scientists. But again, if you went to our website, www.scidev.net, you will find that we do not have, that our articles are spread across all the science topics. There's climate change, there's health, there's environment, there's all kinds of issues. And we never use it. You will find that, I don't know, it's not one scientist that we reach out to. It's not one person. We have a list of renowned, knowledgeable experts that we reach out to from different research institutions, from higher education institutions. And you will find that it's not the case for SciDev at all. We have a vast number of experts that we reach out to when we feature a report or any science topic. Yeah, I mean, one thing that is very important to us is that if you read any of our topics or our stories and you found a scientist that you'd like to reach out to, you could email us as well, and we would share their contact details with you. And we'll be working on creating a robust list so that we can share with maybe other journalists, other people who want to engage our scientists as well.
Again, one thing AAU could also help us do is to give us access to a pool of scientists that we can reach out to, because AAU is a representative of universities in Africa, so it covers all around. So if you could help us with an easier way to reach out to scientists, I know that a lot of them want to speak, so that would be very helpful for journalists as well, and we can share them. And also I shared a feedback form. If you can just kindly help us fill it out for our own statistics. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so what she said is really important. There's the AAU representative here. Please share with us your list of scientists. And then, I mean, their titles, the work that they do, their affiliations as well, their areas of expertise, and we'll be reaching out to them to basically make the work, their science, visible to as many people as possible. So we would, because of that question, I would reach out to the AAU. We would reach out to the AAU and get a list of all the scientists in your network and ensure that we maximize the relationship that we have with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nelson Ijumba from Coventry University Africa Hub. Regarding the Coventry University Africa Hub, regarding the last comment, I don't know if you're aware, the South African Academy of Sciences also has a database of African scientists. So if you can link up with them, or I can share a contact of somebody you can talk to who can give you the database. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, so we're looking forward to fruitful partnerships with as many scientists that are here today, and your colleagues that are not here, that are not present here. Our details, we'll leave our contact details. So reach out to us as we create a database of scientists as well. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this one is it's a warm welcome once again to the event that we are running with. Today is the third day, World Conference on Education and Restitution, the past, the present, and the future. Afrofuturism and Africa's Development Program. Yes, my colleagues were not here to introduce me. Ajamani, I'm just introducing myself because we are trying to run around and do many other things. So my name is Dr. Violet Makuku of the Association of African Universities. I'm a quality assurance specialist and also the workshops coordinator at the AAU. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I also wanted to say this one, we may need to pass it on to our Director of Information and Knowledge Management so that at least she can see how we can collaborate, and maybe she can actually tell together with the World Bank project that is run in the Association of African Universities on the African Centers of Excellence. So if it is of benefit to the AAU, she's the one who can now escalate everything to the top and for discussions to see how the AAU can work with you. I'm here as a quality assurance specialist at this juncture. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, yesterday I was in a panel discussion on rethinking education excellence in Africa. And there's one thing which I didn't talk about as a quality assurance specialist, that, you know, when quality assurance came into the African universities, it was like an overnight thing that if you do not have a quality assurance directorate, or if you do not have a quality assurance unit, then we are not going to accredit programs from your universities. You see, that's how it came. And as the Association of African Universities, we are highly cognizant of this fact. So what happened? People were not well prepared for it. We did not have enough trained personnel to carry out the quality assurance mandate within the institutions. And then you find that they would also need to go and convince the people, the university community, on what quality assurance is, how quality assurance, why quality assurance. And so the gap is still there. Just now, before we started our sessions, we have been discussing with the people who are physically present here and try to give more information about what the AAU does in terms of workshops in general, and then quality assurance in particular. So the questions remain: what is quality in higher education? What is quality assurance in higher education? How do we do it? With what benefits? So as long as those who are working in the quality assurance directorates do not have answers to these questions, people do not have that confidence to follow them, because when they are asked these questions, they can't respond to them in other circumstances because they don't have the answers. So that's why we say, as the AAU, we encourage you to write to us and ask you for an institutional workshop on quality assurance. We can do it 3-4 days for the whole institution. And by the time you remain with your community, I think things will be much better for you in terms of operations and in terms of compliance. What is of special interest this time around is what we call the African Quality Rating Mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that throughout the world, we have got a lot, and I want to say again, a lot of quality assurance, assessment and evaluation processes and procedures from different countries. But the major challenge is that some of them are very, very expensive. You find you can be charged like 100,000, you can be charged like 40,000 to have an institutional assessment and evaluation, maybe on documentation alone, or maybe on locomotives, or maybe on labs alone. But the African Quality Rating Mechanism will enable us and you to have an institutional assessment and evaluation for self-improvement. I want to emphasize this again. An institutional assessment and evaluation for self-improvement. If you are competing with nobody but your own selves as an institution, because you could have to complete a questionnaire where you are pushing in information about your institution, the grants you have won, the publications, the teaching and learning, and many other things to do with non-academic endeavors, accommodation, cafeteria, and health, library, all those things. You rate yourself. You can't lie to yourself if you are not competing with anybody, to tell yourselves, no, in terms of grants, we give ourselves a 1 or a 0, because this year, 2021, we didn't get any grant. In fact, we did not delve to apply for any. And so you are frank with yourselves and you give yourselves a 0. In terms of community engagement, in terms of new programs, you see yourself that you have a number of new programs, And you have also reviewed old programs. So you are giving yourselves a 4. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important tool to even those who are joining us online. We are going to send you the information through the emails that you used to access this event, because it's very important. But I encourage the institutional, because it's more effective. More people are trained about quality and quality assurance at one goal. At the end of the day, you have a common understanding, a common vision to take the institution forward, because definitely we need to rethink education excellence in Africa. And this is one process and one questionnaire and tool that can enable us to get there. What are the advantages of carrying out the African quality rating mechanism process? Number one, you help to build the quality culture in your institution. It's very, very important, because if the whole institution realizes the quality culture in students and staff, I mean, it will be very good to do a little, to do so much with little, because it becomes efficient, it becomes effective to carry out the activities in the institution. People will become cognizant of how important it is also to look after and to conservatively use the utility bills. Because you leave all the lights and air cons on, you leave the leaking taps and the unrepaired washrooms, water running, and at the end of the day, the utility bills take a lot and a large chunk of monies in the institution. But now when people know, it's part of what brings quality, that if we save and we have smaller bills on utilities, it means that we can channel that money to the other things that we need to do. But let's continue to move on to the benefits. One of the benefits, again, is that when you have completed the questionnaire, because there's a questionnaire which you will complete to put all the institutional information together from the departments, which pass on to the faculty, and now to the quality assurance units, where the institutional information is now going to be put together in terms of what is happening in the institution regarding researches, what is happening in the institution regarding program reviews, regarding infrastructure, regarding everything, the catering services, accommodation and health within the institution. It helps. Then you can see your areas of strength, your areas of improvement, and recommendations where you can clearly and easily come up with an action plan, the action plan which you can follow to have the low-hanging fruits first, capitalize on that, as you also address other urgent issues and priority areas. It also helps you to prepare for the 5-year cycle of accreditation and re-accreditation. In most countries, we know that after every 5 years, we undergo a re-accreditation of the programs that we offer. And then if you are in the habit of completing your AQRM questionnaire and going through the process of AQRM institutional assessment and evaluation, it's no task for you, because everything else is there together. And so you have no challenges. It also prepares you for rankings, whether at national level or a global level or a continental level. You will now be able to say and showcase that this is what we have as an institution. But the challenge is that when you are looking for these things hurriedly, some people will not submit on time, and then the deadline comes. But if you have already been compiling the researches, compiling the grants compiling what is happening in terms of community engagement and what is happening in the departments in terms of teaching and learning new programs. It's just pulling out what you need, maybe even to support a grant that you are applying for. So life becomes easier for everybody. So ladies and gentlemen, I just encourage you to get hold of me. Particularly now, I can give you my email and WhatsApp number. I will repeat it and also do it slowly for the benefit of those who are also online. So my name again is Dr. Violet Makuku, and you can reach me on WhatsApp, where I'm very efficient, very fast, and also quickly notice and respond to many people at a time. +233, I'm based in Accra, Ghana. +233 263 129798. I want to repeat again, +233 263 129798. You can also write to me on vmakuku@aau.org. vmakuku@aau.org or info@aau.org. info@aau.org. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I just want to encourage you to get hold of us, and we can do a lot together, particularly capacity building for the quality assurance personnel. Sometimes they are new, they don't know where to start from, they are struggling. They've been appointed just because they've been a former dean, or they've been in a leadership position, or they've been an auditor, or they've been into monitoring and evaluation. But quality assurance is the mother, and it's much broader than monitoring and evaluation. It's much broader than risk management. It's much broader than academic planning. It's much broader than accreditation. Quality assurance is made up of all these, and actually is one of the misconceptions in the institutions, because I've gone to many countries where I realized that people label these units academic planning and quality assurance. Can we change that, please? Because quality assurance is the umbrella. Under quality assurance, we have academic planning, we have accreditation, we have monitoring and evaluation, we have risk management, we have disaster management, and all the other things which you thought were in isolation and were bigger than quality assurance. I'm always available for more information. Thank you.
Dr. Violet Makuku. Thank you, Doc. And we had some comments that were passed on the platform. I'll just do a quick one and read them to you. So we have this from Alice Asim saying that sincerely, there's a quality culture in an institution, law and order becomes the order of the day. I can attest to what Dr. Makuku is saying, having used the quality assurance rating scale in my university, Director of Quality Assurance, University of Calabar, Nigeria. Thank you, Alice, for your comments. And so from Alfredo Bassino says, excellent information. Thank you. So live audience, would you like to share some comments about the African quality assurance rating mechanism? Comments? Quick comments in-house. Okay. Do we have any online? If you would like to say something, you can put your hands up and then we'll call you, or you can send a test so we can read for you any. Oh, all right, sure.
Thank you, Ajman. There's one thing which I forgot to tell the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, when you write to us, we can share with you the word version of the AQRM. We can also share with you the past experiences of the institutions which underwent the African Quality Rating Mechanism. We have, for example, Redeemers University in Nigeria. We did them in 2019. And so when they finish the internal completion of the questionnaire, the AAU will now have to go to the institution just for a verification process. But it also helps to now come up with solid recommendations, solid identification of strengths and areas of improvement. But Redeemers University testified that it became the #1 private university in Nigeria after that exercise. It became #2 in Nigerian universities after this exercise. It also participated in rankings and also applied for research grants and other grants which they won on the basis of transparency. Because when you allow outsiders to come and look into your house and how you stay, it gives a lot of confidence to the other stakeholders. So we can share with you also the 2017 copy of the 15 institutions which also underwent the same exercise. And it's highly encouraging. So write to us and we will share the information with you. I thank you.
All right. So I think that what we've seen this morning from science and also from Dr. Makuku deserves a warm round of applause. Put your hands together for ourselves, what we've done this morning. And also joining us virtually, you're all welcome to the day 3 of the World Conference on Education and Restitution. And we have a hand up almost when we were trying to wrap up anyway. Sorry about the hand disappeared. You can put your hand back, please, if you want to make a comment. Okay. All right. So continuing as the day 3 plenary session 1 that holds on the sub-theme 3 on reclaiming and reconceptualizing African arts, culture, and heritage. This session will be a massive roundtable discussion on the meaning, making, pedagogy, and practice, and it will be chaired and moderated by Her Excellency Professor Abna Buzia. Put your hands together for her. Nice people, as she will make her way up here to chair and moderate Ghana's ambassador to Brazil, Her Excellency Professor Abna Buzia. We can do it better. Put your hands together for her, please. Majestic footsteps up to the podium. It's required. Put your hands together again, please. Yes.
Good morning, all. I guess it's now afternoon, everybody. I am very excited to be here. And I am very grateful to the conference organizers for letting us have this session, which is a particular passion of mine. And what we're going to do is I'm very happy that I actually have 2 colleagues here who have flown in from Brazil and Suriname. And then we are going to be joined by 2 people online, one in Brazil and another in the Netherlands. And I will call the 2 people who are here up to sit up here, and then I will introduce our speakers and tell you what we are doing. So please, Dr. Carolina Moraes, who's flown here from Brazil. While she's talking, I'll tell you who she is. She's a historian and coordinates the Africa Pride, a company seeking to build relationships between Brazil and African countries. Through her work, She's expanded her research on African history and art. She also developed the project Treasures of Our Ancestors, which proactively leads a discussion about the knowledge and the special legacy left behind by our ancestors for other generations. She says talking as an Afro-Brazilian has become a crucial way to bring out this knowledge on health, art, maths, food, culture, amongst other things. Her company and project concentrating on the Yoruba art has showcased an exhibition with a particular collection of His Majesty the Oni of Ife. And as a result of the pandemic, that exhibition can now be accessed online. And our second person present is Mrs. Priscilla van Heckelen-Dousa. Please welcome her. She arrived late last night from Suriname. She's very proud of being a Surinamese maroon woman who is determined to help create a better Suriname. And she says she has a personal vision, which I promise to read out, two of them. Whoever learns to teach will grow exponentially because sharing information is like planting a seed for the world to heal. And two, motivation of youth is growth. I think we can all say amen to that. She is the Deputy Director of Tourism at the Ministry of Transport, Communications and Tourism in Suriname, where she works together with colleagues to make policies and laws for the tourism industry of Suriname, focusing on purposeful marketing and branding to ensure that policies are made fruitful enough to make Suriname more welcoming for foreigners and, importantly, for Surinamese people traveling in their own country, as well as on the reinvestment of profits into tourist sites for the development of the sector. She's also the director of the Pukujani Edutainment Foundation, which strives to disseminate information from senior citizens across to Suriname to the youth. And the foundation combines education with entertainment to promote learning and widen the spread of practical information to keep heritage alive. Those are the two people before you. Joining us online, and I hope we'll be able to focus on them while I introduce them, are Dr. Alessandra Biauchi from Brazil. She's a marketing professor and researcher at the business school at the Pontifical Catholic University. Can we see? Yes, we can see her. In Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And before starting on her academic career, which you'll see has had a profound impact on the subject we're discussing, she worked in the business sector for 15 years in both small and multinational companies. And she has followed two paths in her education, which today complement each other. She has a BA, MSc, and PhD in business administration from the Pontifical University and an MBA in corporate finance. In arts, she has a license in music from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and she is trained in flamenco dance. Her thesis project, Branding of Creative Cities, investigated the impact of live music on a city's brand through a comparative study between Montreal, Canada, and Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And she received the Emerging Leaders in the Americas Program Award from Global Affairs Canada, and which led her for a period to study at the École des Hautes Études Commerciales in Arts Management Department. Her main research interests include creative and cultural interests, industries, marketing for arts and culture, and place branding. And our last speaker is a Ghanaian. He will be first, which is why I'm introducing him last. But Dr. Emmanuel Akwesi Eduampong, Emmanuel, yes, he's there, is joining us from Holland. He's an assistant professor in cultural geography chair group and at the Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and also a senior research associate at the School of Tourism and Hospitality at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. He currently holds a Dutch Research Council Veni grant, researching on the geographies of slavery heritage tourism in the Ghana, Suriname, Netherlands triangle. And in this project, he seeks to synthesize the relational notions of place and embodied performativity in cultural geography with transformative cross-cultural encounters in critical tourism studies and the ideas about social construction of heritage in critical heritage studies, all of which will make perfect sense when you see his presentation. His other research interests are on sustainable tourism development, tourism policy and planning, cultural heritage management, and innovations in qualitative research methods. And the order in which they will be speaking after my introduction, we will begin with Dr. Emmanuel, and then move on to Mrs. Priscilla, and then Dr. Alessandra, and we'll end with Carolina Moraes. They will speak in that order. But I am speaking first because I am here to explain why this wonderful group of people are here together, and why they're here together really has to do with who I am and my particular passions. As you know, I'm Abena Busia. I am a Ghanaian. I was born here in Ghana, but I spent the first years of my life in exile. First, and for 40 years, I have been a professor at Rutgers University in the States. Employed by the English department, I started teaching African-American literature and culture and became a specialist on the culture of Black women of Africa and her diaspora. I'm one of the founding members and second chair of the Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora. Now, that is my academic and personal background intertwined, because what that means is that everywhere around the world, as a human being, I experienced the different and subtle changes in what it means to be Black in different spaces. And as an academic, I was teaching about and learning about the different manifestations of the development of Africa-descended culture in these different spaces. Now, as I said, for 40 years, that is what I'm doing. And 5 years ago, I was stepping down as chair of the Department of Women's and Gender Studies, planning my next book, and you know, thinking of retirement, when I get a phone call from the president saying, would you consider going to Brazil? I don't know many people who would say no to that. That is relevant, though, for two reasons. One, I had to beg the kindness of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the President. I said yes with alacrity, and then said, but I don't want to go in September. I want to go in December, because I had just signed a contract to sail and teach on the Semester at Sea. Plug for this awesome program called Semester at Sea, which takes undergraduates literally around the world. Think study abroad, but instead of being in one place, you're on a boat. And it literally sails around the world, and every 3 to 5 days, the ship docks in a place. The students get a chance to either just like go eat their way around the world, or hike their way around the world, or dance their way around the world, or do whatever they want around the world. Or like on the tour that I was at, there were some people, there were education students who in every stop met university students. As a teacher, you're teaching 3 courses, and then you have to find choose a city for each course to take your students in. This is important because of what happened to me on that journey, which led directly to the idea behind this panel. At the beginning of the semester, I'm teaching a class on, post-colonialism and literature, the rise of modernism in literature, looking at students who do not know the word colonial, haven't heard the word post-colonial, are totally oblivious to the fact that the world used to have great empires, none of the above. But then fast forward about 8 weeks, I'm minding my business in Cochin, India, looking for a musical instrument to buy for my elder brother. And suddenly I hear a voice behind me saying, but Dr. Busia, isn't that a sign of British colonial architecture? Said by a student who had been, it was in my class, but at that point we had already visited Accra and walked around ministries and Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum and that whole part of town. And we had also been to Victoria Wharf in South Africa, in Cape Town, and walked around that part of town. And here we were in Cochin, India, not in a class, just wandering around. And she recognized the style of architecture just because that was the third British colonial city or British imperial city she had been in. A light bulb went on in my head at that point. And then a few months later, here I am in Brazil. I'm ambassador. My mission serves all 12 countries of South America. 9 of them are part of the former Spanish Empire, but the 3 that are not, Brazil, Suriname, and Guyana, 1 a former Portuguese colony, 1 a former Dutch colony, 1 a former British colony. I thought, this is the history of my country. The Portuguese came first, the Dutch were here the longest, and the British the most lasting. I thought, what a perfect moment. And what that means is, it is because I had had a childhood in England and in Holland and then in England, and I was now in Brazil. I found myself able to make the kinds of connections that student had made on that journey. That led me to become determined, because you see, I realized we have a common story, but we don't know it because we're working in silos and isolations. So for the last 3 years, I've been looking for people who will help us create what I call a diaspora heritage training program. My idea, if there's any shipping merchant around here who wants to fund it, please come see me, is to actually sail us from Holland to England, to Portugal, to Ghana, to Brazil, to Suriname and Guyana, visiting those places, talking about the issues, talking about the fabric, talking about the food, talking about the music, talking about the things that I could go on and on about how I saw, but I want to stop because that is why we're having this panel. I started looking for people who understood what I was trying to say and who had thought through some of the complexities of the issue, because it's not as simple as we might think. There's a big emotional connection, but it has cultural, social, historical, economic, etc. implications. There are stories that bind, there are stories that fracture. How do we cope with them? So I have now a group of people. I know all of them, they don't all know me, but the ones that I asked, could you come and take part, are here today. They came when I said, how can we explain the issues around meaning making, teaching, what are the pedagogical issues, and how do we put the idea of diaspora heritage connection into practice? So I will stop and turn over to Dr. Emmanuel, who will begin with talking about his project and showing us a clip to contextualize the big questions that we are looking at from his research in precisely looking at that triangle of Ghana, Suriname, and the Netherlands. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Buzia, for the introduction and the opening remarks. One quick comment. I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen. That's one thing. But if that fails, I can, well, it's on YouTube, so it can quickly be typed up and shown. So I don't know if I have the right to show anything, because I tested it, but the host, rightly so,
yes, Emmanuel, you can share your screen.
Ah, okay. Then I'll show it briefly, but then I'll make some opening remarks because the rest is just in the video. But basically, imagine this past June, I was in Suriname for my research project. And when I was going to Suriname, I was thinking, what are the chances that I will meet any Ghanaian tourist going to Suriname? Because not only is the distance great, as Priscilla can tell you, but also it's quite expensive. So I was wondering, will I get someone? Because that will make my research quite complete in a sense. Because when I was in Ghana last year for my field work at Elmina Castle, I met Dutch tourists there. So I was hoping I could get that as well. And lo and behold, by some miraculous coincidence, here I went to Fort Zeelandia in Paramaribo, and there were two young Ghanaian ladies who had come not from Ghana, but from the Netherlands, because they are based in Amsterdam. And the reason for them coming to Suriname was that they have just been curious because all their schoolmates of Afro-Suriname descent, they behave a bit like Africans, and they've been curious as to why are they like us, but not from where we are from. So the main reason why they had chosen Suriname for a two-week holiday was basically to go and confirm for themselves, to learn why there are people of Afro descent in Suriname who are connected to the Netherlands. And this is basically what my research is about, trying to understand how is the past of slavery heritage, how is it remembered, how is it narrated, and how is it commemorated across different places. And I focus on Ghana, Suriname, and the Netherlands because of a very particular shared history between these three countries. And I'm just going to play you a video that kind of summarizes this research project. And hopefully at the end, when we have room for discussion, yeah, we can discuss a bit more. So if I'm allowed, here it goes. Okay, screen 2. And I need to get the sound, share sound, right. Optimize for video clip, right.
Elmina is a town in a continuous liminal space, shaped and transformed through centuries of encounters with the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the English. Elmina is steeped in the in-between of the past and the present. In Elmina, the new doesn't come to replace the old. The new comes to lie next to the old, just like this old Benya Bridge, which is left lying next to the new Benya Bridge, across which you cross over from the town to the grounds of the St. George's Castle, better known as the Elmina Castle and Slave Dungeons. It is in this liminal space where our story begins. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Akwesi Edwampong, an assistant professor in cultural geography at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. This is a story of my 3-year Veni research project funded by the Dutch National Research Council, NVO, between 2021 and 2023. In this project, I explore how tourism transforms and narrates the past of slavery, specifically that between the Ghana, Suriname, and the Netherlands stemming from the transatlantic slave trade. Why this project? Well, in an increasingly diverse society, the stories we tell ourselves of the past can either bring us together or pull us apart. In the Netherlands, for example, the presence of people of African descent embody a given past. Yet, the stories of slavery, colonialism, and racism are often absent because they are considered as potentially contentious. This is what I refer to as the notion of the embodied absence of the past, where you have the physical presence of people of African descent, yet narrative absence of their stories and their history. And this is exemplified in the yearly polarizing debates around Ketikoti and Swatopede. My research combines insights from cultural geography, tourism studies, and heritage studies to develop this conceptual notion of the embodied absence of the past. I use this concept to examine how such transformations through tourism stimulate plural public memories and engagements that challenge established narratives about the past, identity, and belonging. The theoretical question addressed by this project is this: how do tourism practices and performativity in slavery heritage places generate the embodied absence of the past? The empirical focus of my project lies on the Elmina Castle and Slave Dungeon and Fort Amsterdam in Ghana, Fort Zeelander and Frederiksdorp Plantation in Suriname, the National Slavery Monument and Black Heritage Tours Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I theorize tourism as socio-cultural practices and performances which in these sites enable embodied experiences that generate cultural and political affect and effect that extend beyond these sites as new societal narratives are recreated in an ongoing emergent social process. A key theoretical contribution of my project, therefore, is to show that tourism, through this very process of transformation, can increase historical awareness as it transforms slavery-related sites into places of conviviality, remembrance, and dialogue. It is to this end that an innovative ethnographic fieldwork-based comparative embedded multiple case study has been designed with careful sampling strategy that goes beyond interviews to include detailed observations, focus groups, document analysis, and visual analysis. This approach is robust, aligning well with the theory-building ambitions of the project. I am eager to comparatively explore how in these particular settings, experiences, meanings, and narratives are socially produced through the tourism encounter. For instance, which narratives are told by tour guides at which site? What remain absent, and how do these narratives change depending on the group of tourists or visitors at that site? This research will provide the insights about places of remembrance and underlines the cultural value of heritage in stimulating public engagement and in understanding and coming to terms with the past. My project will provide insights into the lived experiences of visitors to slavery heritage tourism sites, the tension in these places, and how tour guides deal with these tensions, as well as the transformative potential of such visitations. My study highlights tourism's transformative role in raising awareness of slavery heritage and will inform policy debates on how to deal with places of remembrance in contemporary society. In our diverse society, the more we tell the stories of the past, the more united we become, and the better we can tackle present challenges such as polarization, racism, and discrimination. Ideas and change often start small, but can accelerate quickly once we keep working at it. I am highly enthusiastic and motivated in carrying out this research project, which I strongly believe contributes to academic knowledge and can play an important role in raising awareness and stimulating this important dialogue.
Okay, stop sharing it. Wait. Sorry, no, stop sharing. It's fine. Oh, yeah. Okay, I think I will let the credits be so that there is enough time for other people to talk. So, thank you.
Right, thank you. What we decided was that each speaker would make a brief presentation and then we'd have a roundtable discussion. So we will now move on to Madam Priscilla. Here we go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mibalu wale speak yodi, which means I greet all of you respectfully. Audio, and then you answer. Audio. Audio. I am a Surinamese and I am a Maroon. And I say that I am a Maroon because it's the most important part of my being. Being a Maroon means I am coming from a community in which I can still see Africa. Actually, that's how the tourism industry presents the Maroons of Suriname. They say, come to Suriname, where you can see a part of Africa. And when you go back, you can still see that. Coming here, I had to travel all the way to Amsterdam, and from Amsterdam, I traveled to Ghana. So I actually passed and then turned back. And for the future, it shouldn't be that way. It should be possible for me to take a plane and just come to Ghana. Because when I think of stories in the past, because what I want to talk about today is the past, the present, and the future. When I hear stories from the elders, they are talking about during slavery times, where our ancestors flew from West Coast, from Ghana, from Kumasi, from places in Africa, all the way to the Caribbean to free their people. From 1760, the first treaty was signed. That's like 100 years before slavery was stopped in Suriname. So when some of our ancestors came to Suriname, you have different Maroon groups. You have 6 Maroon groups. When they came into Suriname, some of them were like, we are already here. Let's try and work. Some of them came, and because of the difference between Suriname and Brazil, they were treated differently. No slave was treated okay. We all know that. But because they were treated differently in Brazil, when the Jewish Portuguese brought them to Suriname, on arrival, they were like, I'm not doing this. I'm going back to the bushes. And they went straight away. The Saramakan group is the oldest, one of the oldest Maroon groups we have. The Okanisi, we have different groups. And when, for example, an elderly person speaks Kumanti, people from Africa can understand them because the language is still there. We have a village in the Saramakan area called Daumi. It's now Benin. We still have the name. So certain things which you don't even see anymore in Ghana, you can still see it in Suriname. Or you see it in Ghana in a modernized way, but in Suriname, they still do it. For example, this cloth is made by hand. We didn't have, our ancestors didn't have machines running from the plantations. And the culture they had, and we still have, is, for example, when you go and you see people dancing in fire or dancing on broken bottles, studies can still not explain how they do it. I can't explain how they do it, but I know they can. So I know that when stories are told, it's not just stories, it's the truth about our past. So let's now be here. What are we doing with this information? What will happen after a couple of years? Will we still be able to have people who can dance in fire? Will we still be able to have people who can make clothes like this by hand? What are we going to do about it? That's the present situation we are in. As people of African descent all over the world, one thing we should remember, we are powerful just by being us. We are powerful just by being ourselves. When I arrived at the airport and I saw lots of people waiting, I was like, where is my name? But I wasn't afraid. I was just like, where is my name? Because everybody there could be the person picking me up. But if I went to Amsterdam, the first person I would look like, okay, you look a bit like me. Maybe it's you. That's how we look at people in this world. But it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't matter where you step. It doesn't matter where you come. Everybody, it doesn't matter if they are high standard, or if they are rich or billionaires, they have the standards our ancestors should have from the past. So what are we doing in the present? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about what are we keeping? What are we not throwing away? Because we come to certain places and we're like, oh no, I have to. No, you are powerful by being you. So for the future, our children, let's teach them how to talk with drums. They already know how to talk with phones. Let us teach them how to talk with drums. I was in Jamaica to meet with the Maroon village and the Maroon elders there. And they were playing drums, spiritual drums. And I was dancing along. You know, everybody's dancing and I see some people getting in trance like, okay, I'm dancing along. And I felt a chillness and I went and I sat down. Okay, I'm not home, just sit. I was like that because how can a drum give me that feeling? How can someone playing an instrument have me moving even if I didn't ever hear that rhythm? It's because we are powerful by being us. So let's take this. Let's know our past. Let's study our past in our present. And for the future, let's make sure even if it's one child, even if it's a group of children, but let's teach them our history so that they can use that and stay powerful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. And in fact, we move on to Dr. Alessandra, who has already started trying to grapple with that question. What are we doing with this information? And where are the traces of the past? So, Dr. Alessandra, is she up? Can we focus on her, please?
Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Good morning from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I would like to start by thanking Professor Abna Busia for the invitation to participate in this panel. I would love to be with you in person in Accra, but unfortunately it was not possible, and I would take the advantage of technology to participate in this discussion. My name is Alessandra, and I am Brazilian, born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, a city that had a central role as the epicenter of slavery in Brazil. Studies show that around 2 million Africans brought to the Americas as slaves disembarked in Rio. As a Brazilian, my heritage is European, African, and indigenous. I know a lot about my European heritage and almost nothing about my indigenous and African heritage. And I believe that there are people like me who need and want to learn more about their identity and hear the stories about our African heritage. So I'm honored to be part of this discussion. Regarding my perspective, I am a professor and researcher at the business school at PUC-Rio. So my locus of enunciation is from the marketing and art management point of view. And on this occasion, I would like to bring 3 topics for our discussion, and I will share a presentation with you. Okay. Okay, so the first topic is cultural branding. Cultural branding, it's a branch of place branding theory that studies the effect of the arts, culture, and heritage for the development of a place brand. And why cultural branding? Because places compete with one another. They compete to attract investments, tourists, events, and just like other organizations, they also need to use branding strategies to build their images and thus differentiate themselves. And identity is a fundamental component of a place brand. It represents an element of differentiation. It is developed over time, and it is part of the place history and heritage. In this conference, we are discussing Africa's development, and I believe that the arts, culture, and heritage are elements of differentiation that should be further leveraged for the continent's development. So when Professor Abna told me about the education project to reclaim the African heritage in the Americas through art, I was immediately struck by how essential and timely this project is. And that leads me to the second topic that I would like to address today, which is soft power. Soft power is a term coined in the 80s by political scientist Joseph Nye. Soft power is related to the influential power of a country that uses its image to attract, influence, and persuade through its ideas, culture, and values. In the field of culture, there are several examples of countries that use soft power to bring economic, social, and touristic gains. For instance, Hollywood and the American movies production, besides taking the American way of life to the world, generate billions of dollars. Russian ballet is known all over the world. The South Korean government supports its creative industries, especially music, movies, and more recently, digital games. which project the country's image to the world. It is not by chance that the K-pop music style has the K of Korea in its name. It was necessary to put the country of origin of the musical style in the brand. Regarding my country, Brazil, Brazilian soft power, it's deeply connected to Carnival, our great annual event that attracts people from all over the world, moves our internal tourism, and brings resources to many cities. And regarding Africa's soft power, I believe there is a lot of untapped potential. I also believe that the project to reclaim the African heritage in the Americas through art and education can collaborate in building the soft power for the African continent. The third topic that I would like to address today is an example of a project that is already underway in Rio and is called Rio Memória Ação, Rio Memory and Action. Rio has memory, Rio wants action. The institution was founded by Bernardo Pupi. He is watching us today, and his associate, Alcino Amaral. Bernardo was my student at PUC-Rio Business School, and Alcino is a history teacher, and I believe this was a great combination. The goal of the Institute is to resignify memories, to move actions that transform places, stories, and people in the city of Rio de Janeiro. One of the Institute's initiatives is to promote city experiences through walking tours. And one of the walking tours is the African Heritage Tour. This tour is a guided walking tour conducted by specialists in history, geography, and samba. The route takes you through sensitive memory spaces and tell and highlight the historical elements of African heritage, recognizing the centrality of Rio in the context of the African diaspora. The goals are to understand the social, economic, and cultural dynamics of the process of slavery and its consequences in the development of Brazilian society. The second goal is to identify the history of African and Afro-Brazilian culture in Rio de Janeiro and in the country. And third, to recognize sensitive heritage sites, such as Pedra do Sal, Instituto Petros Novos, and Cais do Valongo, as well as important Afro-Brazilian characters in Brazilian history. Here we have some pictures of the region called Little Africa. Little Africa is located in Rio's Port region. As I told you before, studies show that around 2 million Africans brought to the Americas as slaves disembarked in Rio. More than 500,000 arrived at Valongo Wharf alone. Here's a picture of Valongo Wharf. It was a place that was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site in 2017. This route is about Brazilian legacy and its African roots. It showcases archaeological sites and how they're connected with who we are as Brazilians. Here we have more pictures of the tour, and I have a very quick video to show. It's less than 1 minute. I will show to you about the tour.
A favela é sempre lembrada como um espaço de dor, um espaço do sofrimento, da violência, mas da favela tem muita potência, da favela tem muita riqueza. E a gente vai cantar a potência da favela. Abre a janela da favela, você vai ver a beleza que tem por dentro dela. Abre a janela da favela. Você vai ver a beleza que tem por dentro dela. Numa vasta extensão, onde não há plantação, nem ninguém morando lá. Cada pobre que passa por ali só pensa em construir seu lar. E quando o primeiro começa, os outros depressa procuram marcar. É aí que o lugar então passa a se chamar
É aí que o lugar então passa a se chamar
So thank you very much. Here is Rio Memória Ação Team and the Instagram account if you like to know more about this project. And I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now we'll go to our last presenter before we open up to our discussion. So over to you, Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, Brazil. I know that there is people from Brazil following us and other areas of the world. First of all, I want to say that it is a pleasure, and I'm so happy to be here. And I want to start appreciating Professor Ambassador Abenabusia for making this invitation, and also Dr. Pasha Obeng for organizing this conference and bringing all of us together over here. I will start, with this figure of Eshu that's well known in the Yoruba culture as the Orisha. But besides the fact of Eshu is a Orisha, he also represents a fundamental element in the Yoruba philosophy that we can call the movement of communication. And that's what I intend to do that today here. So our discussion will be around the African history for anti-racist education and art and Yoruba philosophy. Next, please. In respect of my elders, and this is very particular and personal, and I would like to just to share with you. I would love to dedicate this presentation to my past grandma, Ubiracina Souza da Silva, the mother of my mother. She became our ancestor in the last 10th of June this year. And she was an African woman, even never being able to step in those lands. She died with 101 years old, and she was never be able to step here, but I know that she's here with us as well. So next step, please. I want to start with a key question that one student of 13 years old made to me back in 2018. I was preparing the reception for the Oni of Ife in Brazil, the first Yoruba king. It was the first time that he was coming to Brazil as well. And we did a short documentary, and I was going around some schools to talk about the Yoruba culture with teenagers. So I showcased the very short documentary of about 10 minutes, to a public of 40 students, 14 teenagers around 13, 14 years old, and a public school with a Black population. So they were all quiet. And when teenagers of 14 years old are all quiet, you just, start to get worried, what's going on? So after the presentation of the documentary, one of them just stood up and said, but teacher, is there a Black king alive in the world? Is his family was never enslaved? So at that moment, I wanted to be sincere. I wanted to cry, but I was in front of 14 teenagers. I couldn't cry. I need to, put myself together. And I just started to think about the dimension of the damage of the education developed by the West society have caused in Brazil. A simple teenager of 13 years old cannot imagine that somebody that is Black can be a king, can be wealth, can, be alive on these days. So that goes to the fact of the deep gap of knowledge that Afro-descendants in Brazil, they have, especially the knowledge about before they were enslaved. The fact, teaching African history in Brazil have become compulsory by the law. In 2003, our former President Lula have signed a law, number 10-639, that's making compulsory teaching Afro-Brazilian and African history and culture in the schools. And that law will complete 20 years next year, and we still have a long way to go. That also shows the need of implementation and an anti-racist agenda in Brazil. Note that nobody in Brazil have never, make a law to teach Greek history, Roman history, or Portuguese history, only the Pan-African history, because without the law, we will probably not have that subject, being taught in the schools or either in the universities. To me, as a historian and also a teacher, education is beyond the classroom. And I want to join my friends here, Priscilla and also Alexander and Emmanuel, that have pointed out these lines. We are the ones who built the country. Brazilian, like I shared with you yesterday, we are 56% of Black population, but we are not sitting down in the economic power or in the political power yet. But I want to give you some sample why I'm saying that teaching education and African history is beyond the classroom. Next, please. In downtown of Rio City, the same city that Alessandra was talking about on her presentation. Sorry, can go to the next one, please. We have a huge statue in brass that we call in Brazil, Zumbi dos Palmares. That statue was put in there, about 35 years ago to celebrate a warrior who fought against the Portuguese for freedom during the 17th century. And he was also a leader of one of the biggest communities of runaway slaves called Quilombo dos Palmares. If you are walking in the Rio street and you ask anybody there, who is that statue? They will answer to you, that is Zumbi. That's okay. But the challenge is that head, this head that you are seeing in the screen, it's not only Zumbi dos Palmares. Any Yoruba person that is coming from Africa and is step in Rio, look to the same statue and ask me, Carolina, what is the Oni of Ife doing in downtown of Rio? And they get very confused when I tell them, but that is Zumbi. And it's like, why are you calling Oni of Ife Zumbi? Because they are not understand the warrior. They don't know the history. They understand Zumbi, the monster. Yes. So the question that the Yoruba people put into me is very simple. Next one, please. Here's the point that leads us to the African history. In the middle of the street, on the same area called Little Africa, that's the name of this area in Rio. And it's a very fundamental point from the Yoruba philosophy and perspective. The person who made, the decision to take this head to represent Zumbi dos Palmares have chosen a Yoruba head to give a king face to the Zumbi, the warrior, because nobody, knew his face as a warrior. But unfortunately, that history was lost to Brazilians, and they can identify the Yoruba king seeing the head, but the Yoruba aesthetics are there. The Yoruba philosophy of Ori, Cabeça, the head is there as well. And that takes us to the point of, let's talk about African civilization before the slave time. Next one, please. Even if you want to see the original head, because that is a replica that we have in Rio, the original head that we call Oriolokun, this statue that we are seeing is about 30 centimeters. This statue is placed today. You can't go to Nigeria to see them. You need to visit the British Museum to check on this statue that was made in 13th century in Ile-Ife, Nigeria. And that's why I'm so excited to watch the documentary after our sections that will take us to that debate. I don't have time to be going there. But by the way, to know about the Yoruba treasures, you need to travel around, and go to Britain to be there and see. African art is a way to teach transgression. There is a simple meaning that is not, Brazilians are not able to see. The same figure that represents to us a warrior is also a king of Africa. But we just know half of the history. We don't know the complete history. It's very difficult to Brazilians to know the history before the enslavement. And that's why I always take my grandmother as an example. Took her 19 years to learn that she was not a descendant of slaves, but that she was a descendant of a civilization that at some point of the history was enslaved. And that's what we are trying to change in the topic of anti-racist education. You know, you need to put this narrative together from Africa, and we need to be able to touch any students in diaspora, so no one will stand and ask, teacher, is there a Black king in the world? You know, African has a lot of knowledge, science, and we need to put this together to them. So they will be, you know, they want to recognize themselves like a mirror looking to Oriolokun, this statue. Next one, please, just to conclude. To make an effective anti-racist education, we must go beyond the trade history and, you know, go deep, dive deep at the African history and philosophy. And I'll take the words of Professor Bell Hooks when she said that we need to teach to transgress. Basically in Brazil, that's what we are doing. We are teaching the transgression of going beyond the past of enslavement and going back, like in a Sankofa movement that we discussed yesterday, to take what we need from our ancestors to keep ourselves together looking to the future. Next one, and the last one, please. Just to finish, taking this Yoruba art and all the knowledge of philosophy that is behind art and science as well, we put together with Oni of Ife and we developed an online exhibition called Treasures of Our Ancestors to bring closer to anyone, you know, some perspectives of the Yoruba philosophy through the art. It's available online in Portuguese, English, Spanish, and French. What we hope, you know, is to develop new materials, and we do need to work this together with each African country to create a new and brand anti-racist education in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Can everybody still hear me? Because I can't hear myself. All right. Thank you. Please, could I have the two panelists back? Is it possible to focus on Alessandra and Emmanuel, so that, thank you, so that everybody's seeing the panelists. All right, thank you. So those have been our presentations. I hope you understand why I asked these people to present. And in fact, you know, when Emmanuel was speaking about how he met the Ghanaians at the start of his project, it reminded me, I went to Suriname on an official trip in June. Was it July? No, in July. But I had this conference in mind and thinking how and where could I find people. And I went to a ceremony and somebody came up to me and greeted me, and it was Emmanuel. But on the way to that meeting, I had gone to check in, and I noticed this woman because she was wearing a beautiful suede jacket, and I was standing behind her in line. And I noticed her because I'm always losing things in airports, and I'm training myself. When I've checked in, put away your passport, put away your pen, put this away, put it in your bag, look around you, make sure you've got everything before you move. And I was behind this woman, and I noticed she was doing everything that I don't usually do, and I'm trying to tell myself to do. So I smiled, and I noticed her beautiful jacket. She didn't notice me. She moved on, I checked in. I went up to the lounge, went straight to the ladies' room. I saw her walking out. She didn't notice me smile, but I smiled to myself. Then when we went, I entered late. When we boarded, I boarded right there. Who was I sitting beside? The same one. And I knew this was divine intervention. And I had heard of the Valongo Wharf. I had gone there, discovered it and walked around it myself, but on a day when I was on an official trip and had no information. Then we start talking, and she talks about her students who do a tour of Little Africa that begins at the Valongo Wharf. So 3 weeks ago, I did that walk that you saw. Because what I hope, what I'm asking them all to think about and going to impress them to join me to do, each one of us approached this subject from a different perspective. Each one of us with different skills, each one of us with different questions, but each one of us from the same basis and starting point of our missing histories and the structural disempowerment that take place to make that history absent, and our responsibilities to fill in the gaps. And so to go back to Emmanuel, his wonderful formulation of physical presence and narrative absence is so great because it encompasses so much. Like, for example, you go to Brazil, you go to Salvador, the thing they give you to eat, which is considered part of their national food, is acarajé. And you're a Ghanaian and you look at this, and what you know is this is akara. They just made it bigger and filled it with stew rather than putting the stew on the side. But it's the same mixture, same dish. Who knows? Who knows its origins? Who knows why it survived? The women who prepare it know the secret, and they know that it survives because it was sacred to the gods of their ancestors. But the tourists who come and enjoy eating the acarajé con camarão, have they any idea what it is they're eating? Those are the questions that I want to interrogate. My question is, how do we teach this? What do we, today we've had reference to cloth, reference to food, reference to music, reference to place, reference to name. Alessandra's students sing at each important stage, not because they love to sing and dance, but because they know that music is the embedded history. But the kinds of questions the policymakers need to ask, the tourist makers need to ask, the ministers of education need to ask, why in Brazil do we not recognize the head of the Oni of Ife? Why in Brazil do they not know that there are kings still living? In Suriname, I was there when Otumfuo went. You should have seen the reaction. When Carolina spoke, one of the things that was important to me was that she was speaking about preparing for the return of the Oni. In Suriname, they prepared for the return of Otumfuo. That recognition of that return journey is also important. There's a wonderful film I teach with, sponsored by the Brazilian embassy here in Ghana, about the return of the chief drummer of the Tabom community here, a community that very few Brazilians know even exist. How many of us in Ghana outside that community remember who they are? Remember that they came in their freedom from Brazil and were given their liberty, given a place to be here, and have changed the history of Ghana. They have given us Justice Georgina Wood. They have given us Scissors House. They've given us Don Morton. They've given us Azuma Nelson. They've given us a whole host. They've given us the first two-story building in Accra. We need to know that Brazil needs to know that. So I want to turn and ask first in question, if any of you have any questions of your fellow panelists or any observations from your fellow panelists. And while we start that, I will ask if there have been any questions from the audience. So, but if you could give me just a minute, I wanted, if any of them wanted to respond to each other. Or you'll just let me turn it to the floor first, because we can. All right, we'll take questions from, we have a website, a WhatsApp group now, so we can ask our own questions. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. You know, yesterday I felt like crying when she was talking. The name again, please, sorry. Carolina. Carolina. Please, Mr. Carl. Yes, may you please stand up? Yes. I don't know who else was there in the event. Remember the event we organized the other time. Do you remember the lady? The lady said, I want Sir Carl to remember that. What you said yesterday, but he was not there. You said that when we come to Africa, people say you belong to Brazil or the West. When you go there, again, they say you don't belong here. Say, Carl, do you remember that woman who cried? The woman ended up crying. You can take your seat and then maybe it will come to you. We were together with him. We organized again an event, the AAU and UNESCO. And we had an excellent event there. But unlike this one, there it was fully packed, but people did not have enough time to express. But what I remember vividly is that for that woman, we ended up allowing her to talk because she was highly emotional and affected. Where do we belong? We belong here, but when we come here, people say we belong there. When we go back there, people say we belong here. So what should we do? Please, can we also have a bit of a discussion there? How can we make sure that our own become very comfortable when they come back home? I mean, that's where I'm almost driving it. Thank you, Ajaman. It really touched me because it made me be reminded of that lady. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. I want to say something from the diaspora perspective, or from the Brazilian perspective, actually. Brazilians, Afro-Brazilians especially, you know, they do want to come Africa. They do want to call Africa home. They are ready to do, you know, this trip back, but they don't even know that Africa wants them. So we have a gap communication, and especially when you talk with Brazil as well, you know, we have sometimes a difficulty of the language because the most part of Brazilians don't speak English. Do you understand? So they can go to the internet. Maybe you have so many things about the year of return, but that year of return, everything is in English. So nobody's, you know, addressing to them. So we need to make it very clear, you know, Ghana, every country that is represented here and other ones that are watching us, we need to make it very clear and loud to the Afro-Brazilian, see, come, you have a space over here. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
You know, I'm glad you raised that point because this is something we're trying to tackle at the mission. Now, the feeling of we need to know you want us works at many, many levels. And that there is a emotional, historical, etc. level, which is a whole other big discussion. But the technical we can address at least. One of the things I must confess, I was very proud of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about was when the Homeland Return Bill was about to be introduced in Parliament. Those of us in countries with significant Afro-descendant populations like Brazil, the United States, etc., we actually got a call we got a call from the technical teams at the ministry saying, we need you to get people for these workshops. And they actually workshopped the paragraphs of the bill. And they talked about what the bill meant, why it was different for Afro-Brazilians, for Afro-descendants, etc. So that the gesture is being made. Of course, the question of language came up because we were speaking in English and struggling to translate. And a very important thing came up. For instance, to become a citizen of Ghana, you need to show competence in a Ghanaian language. Well, the Afro-Brazilians and the Hispanics said, English is already a foreign language for us. So will you consider that if we become competent in English, that can be our requirement? I don't know the answer to that, but what I'm saying is there was a drill down to that kind of detail. And there were people like, for example, people gathered in 5 cities in Bolivia. Who would have thought Bolivia? I was stunned. I'm the ambassador to Bolivia. I did not know that we had enough interest in the Homeland Return Bill in Ghana for them to literally gather in 5 cities to listen to the webinar on the Homeland Return Bill. So we are trying. We are trying. But as we say, there's also the level of the knowledge, the personal knowledge, the history, the grandmother. How do you recognize? One of the things that works a lot is simply walking the streets. Because, you know, walking the streets of Suriname, I've seen my uncle, I've seen my, people. One day I almost went running up to people at the university here might know I had an uncle called Uncle Gwabna Bame, who was at the Institute of African Studies he's passed away a long time now, but I literally walked quickly up to somebody because he looked so much like my uncle. The foods, the eats, do you want to? Yes, please do.
Yes, just a quick remark. When I told my mom I was invited by Ambassador Busia, she was like, he's too old to be an ambassador. I was like, Mom, it's not your uncle or I'm talking about, because the name Busia is a name in Suriname. So when I told her, she thought maybe he has traveled, he became an ambassador. So she thought her cousin was invited me to Africa. So the weekdays, the fact that the weekdays when you were born on a certain day, you got a certain name, we still have that in Suriname. Kwaku, Afua, maybe the way we speak, I was born on a Friday, so maybe I don't speak it as you here in Africa would, but I know it's something like Afua or Afia, something like that. So we still have those traditions. We still have them, and sometimes why we are losing them is because we took the history of the Europeans. For example, we had names for twins. If it was a boy and a girl, they got a certain African name. If it was 2 girls, they had certain African names. What we did was, after Christianity, we started calling a boy and a girl Adam and Eve. That's how so we have to pass the European influence to go back to the roots. But as the ambassador said, she saw her uncle. I'm still seeing uncles and aunts, and here in Ghana, I'm only here for a couple of hours, but I have never felt like I am in Suriname, like how I'm feeling that I am in Ghana. It's only the fact that it's really different, but I just feel like I'm at home. So that's why I said we are very powerful people.
And if online is allowed and can be heard, or can you hear me?
Who's speaking? Emmanuel, please do. And
sort of the girl speaking. No, I just wanted to kind of in reference to the specific question that the lady asked, I also think part of the acceptance of whether Afro-Brazilians or Afro-Suriname people feel at home in Ghana or in Nigeria or elsewhere depends on also the historical education that is given. Because it's that lack or the gaps in that historical heritage education that makes people in Ghana say, well, you don't look like us, you're Brazilian, rather than that you are Ghanaian, because there is also not that depth of historical knowledge and awareness about Ghanaian diaspora or African diaspora that are spread around, who through different mixes and interchanges might not look exactly as we do, but are fully Ghanaian or African. And so I think part of it also lies within Africa in terms of education. So not only do the diaspora need to educate themselves and get the knowledge about their roots, but also the root itself need to know its offshoots, in a sense, so that when the offshoots come home, that there is a mutual recognition of it and not the disappointment of, oh, but I learned them from here, but I don't know that. And then you get this mix of, you are here, you don't belong, you are there, you don't belong. I think that's important. And one quick comment, I mean, from Carolina, which I really found the expression really nice and would like to borrow. I just wanted to check if I got it right. So your grandma said she's a descendant of a civilization that at some point was enslaved, right? That was the expression. I think that, yeah, that's a really nice way also for me to think of it, because there's this whole debate about, is it slaves or enslaved? And I think this actually moves it beyond that dichotomy of is it slaves or enslaved, but actually that they are descendants of a civilization that at some point in time got displaced. And I think starting from that also shows that there is a history before slavery. I think that, yeah, that was a mind twister for me. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
My name is Nelson Ejumba from Coventry University Africa Hub. It's just a small comment, starting with an appreciation of Your Excellency for putting this initiative together, but also appreciating the contributors who have really given us the perspective of the issue that I involved. Thank you very much. Now, the issue of the differences between Africans in Africa and Africans in the diaspora, I call it a perceived difference because it was forced as part of the divided rule. There was this intention by the colonialists to make people feel different, that those who are in America, in South America, yes, they look like you, but actually are not the same. And that mentality, you know how psychologically it works, made people in Africa feel that, yes, you look alike, but you are different. And I think that's part of this problem of people feeling, not knowing where they belong. And I don't think we need to continue blaming the colonialists because as we heard from our speaker from Suriname, we are powerful by being us. We have recognized the problem. I think we need to find the solution of how we can get together. There's a lot of attempts in the diaspora for people to know where they came from in terms of reconnecting and so on. I think equally in Africa, we have a responsibility of educating our children ourselves. How come we have people looking like us in the different parts of the world, but you're actually part of one big family, one big heritage. And I think if you enforce this into the curriculum of how people are taken against their will to the different parts of the world and how we can work together because we're actually the same, I think these cultural differences, which are really perceived but they're not real, are going to go away. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate this session because it has been quite enlightening. Thank you.
I think we have time for the last two questions, Professor Senyami, and then you'll be the last, madam. You'll be the last. Okay, thank you. Can
I please make a comment or a contribution instead of ask a question? Is that okay?
Please feel free.
Okay, so I was quite pleased when Dr. Eduampofu said in his last remark that our history precedes slavery. And I think Professor Abnabuzia made the same statement yesterday. But then there was a point in your documentary, Professor Educ, where you said, this is where our history begins. So I was going to actually ask about that, but then you kind of corrected it there. The beauty for me about this panel is that in terms of this, the broader sub-theme of reclaiming, what all 3 or 4 presenters have done is showing how we are recovering memories. You know, Toni Morrison says America suffers from a national amnesia. And then in Beloved, that beautiful novel, she talks about the child at the end who disremembered and unaccounted for. Nobody remembers her because no one is looking for her. And then we have that scene in the clearing where Baby Suggs Holy is telling the formerly enslaved people to love themselves, because the only grace that you can imagine is the grace that the only saving grace you can have is that you can imagine for yourself, because they hate your dark labor, they hate yourself, etc. And then you see that the connections are there in terms of what the penultimate speaker just made about us being one people. You know, when you go to the Maroons in Jamaica, they have Cujo and Achampon as heroes. And we know they had Sister Nanny as well as a Maroon. So I think that there's that correlation between the Surinamese Maroons and then the Jamaican Maroons. And then in Jamaica, they have the stories, Anansi, beat the drum, and we have Kwekwa Nancy here as well. So there are all those connections. And I think that this panel is bringing that out beautifully. Another thing about the diaspora and we having to learn to, Amatedus play Anoa, and then Dilemma of a Ghost talks in Anoa, the child asks the grandmother something about slavery and says, hush, hush, nobody wants to talk about it. But these are the kinds of conversations that will help us understand each other better in terms of our heritage, our common heritage across the Atlantic. And I think that it's all, the people of African descent are always welcome home. The key thing is what you're doing here is education, because there's a lot of misinformation. And the divide and rule thing is also there. And these kinds of narratives, these kinds of encounters, this kind of education that you're doing here is actually going against the grain in terms of how the history is taught and how people are taught to be divisive and to hate each other, etc. And then the whole complication about home. And Professor Abuzia, you say this yourself in all my friends are exiles, born in one place, we live in another, you know, with aplomb and the command of languages, we are stride across continents with the self-assurance of those who know where they come from. But home itself, it's a kind of very fraught thing. And okay, I think I need to stop because I might go on and on. But I just wanted to talk about some of the connections that I see in terms of the different presentations and how the whole project that you're doing you're doing here has to do with retracing, recovering, and unearthing little, like the student who sold to you, oh, Professor Buzia, isn't that the architecture of colonial Britain, etc. It's in those little hidden narratives that we can regroup and regather and bring out that bigger picture of who we really are as a people. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's why I'm determined to find somebody to fund the trip. All right, please, the last question, and then we will close with Sister Priscilla, who has a poem for us.
Thank you very much. I just want to, again, very quickly appreciate the organizers of this wonderful gathering. And I want to say that I've been particularly involved in this session, and to thank Her Excellency, the Professor Buse, for getting people who actually have the information to back up our discussion, especially when I saw the Elmina stuff, and also Our Lady from Brazil, and the hand-woven cloth, you know, that was displayed verbally, though, because I was not so close enough to see it. I want to also appreciate, in a way, the idea that I don't know if this, if our gentleman that just came in was the one that talked about the issue of Africans in Africa and Africans in the diaspora. Anyway, the last but one contributor, you know, this last person, the one before. And I want to say we should not forget something. Now, when we do a kind of comparison between Africans, talking about the need to look at Africa in a repairing form, we need to understand that when we have Africans Africans in Africa, Africans in the diaspora, the massive block of Africans who are returnees to Africa is very, very important. I was very happy when Professor talked about the Tabon. When I came on a UNESCO research work in 2021, a long time ago, I came across the Tabon. I was able to, go into their culture, talk about a lot of things they were doing. And I have a slot too that I could show if time permits during the coming session that I'll be a part of, Reconceptualizing Cultural Heritage. I want to say that the contribution from the professor, that the Tabon had contributed so much into the culture of Ghana, into the socio-cultural aspect of the country, is very important. In Lagos, we have a similar thing. The returnees came and they had a problem also of integrating into the community. It was so bad in the beginning that there was a kind of separation from their traditional relatives. When they came back from Brazil, they were called the Aguda. Some people call them, at least some other part of them, the Amaros. But the people that they met were kind of hostile. We need a situation in which hostility will be removed from integrating our brothers and sisters. We need also to understand that at the end of the day, the people who came and initially were almost rejected because of the mentality of the indwelling Africans, we need to understand that right now, Lagos has benefited so much, just like the Tabon, from the Tabon, so much from the Agudas. And I will quickly round up. I want to say that the masons that came from Brazil did a whole lot of decoration and redressing to Lagos. A lot of things came on. People are able to now intermarry, intermingle, and we have names today in Lagos that are, reflective of Brazil. The Ferreiras, the Da Costas, the Verissimos, Augustos, all of them, real families solidified because intermarriages went on, and all that could be discussed later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, we could add to that list, Daroche, Van Leer, Van der Poy, Bartels. But please,
Excellency,
yes.
We have one contribution from.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Yes. My name is Carl Ampa. I'm from UNESCO. And Madam Ambassador, we met at the office and we had a discussion on this project that you're working on. And I believe that the contribution could be to UNESCO's project that is now called Roots of Enslaved People. It used to be called the Slave Root Project, but because of the context and all the discussions around it, the terminology has changed so that we get a better understanding of what the issues were. And I believe that this project of yours can really contribute that. Maybe it's a discussion we can take to the next level at some point in time and see how.
I'll be in office tomorrow.
For those online, I'll put a lot of resources. I've posted a lot of resources online in the chat. You can go in there and see what UNESCO's work in the area has been: racism, the roots of enslaved people, general history of Africa, even videos that Zainab Badawi produced out of the Slave Root Project, general history of Africa. You can take time and go through all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. All of us have spoken again, except for Alessandra. So I wondered, Alessandra, do you want to say something quickly before we end with Priscilla? Because we are all eager to, everybody online, stay for the next session because you need to see the film that follows us.
Yes, I will be very, very quick. Well, I believed in this project of the diaspora heritage education since the beginning, since that first meeting on the plane. So in listening to my fellow panelists and to the audience, I realized that we have many voices and minds that can work together to make this project happen. So as a teacher, I know the transformative power that experiential learning can bring. And these experiences are unique, they are memorable, and they are impactful. They provoke a kind of reflection that a traditional class could hardly bring. So I would be honored to collaborate with this project and help with the development of a teaching plan where the experience is part of the learning process. And I thank you all for this invitation. It was a life learning experience to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's just a very short commentary, because when you're talking about the Afro diaspora coming back home, you know, we need to take the discussion to the level of the policymaker as well. We cannot forget. We need to decolonize our business minds, African and diaspora. We need to decolonize our education minds. Just to make a very short statement, from Brazil to Ghana, you know, I did a trip of almost 24 hours traveling. But if you had a straight flight, that would be 7 hours. Do you understand? To enter Amsterdam, I didn't need a visa, just enter and I came out. To enter Ghana, I paid a fee to visa. So I want to feel back home, but home, you know, we need to work on the police as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We've been working on that flight now for 5 years, you know. So we'll do it. But please, and just to say, Priscilla is here, sent by, she is a policymaker in the Ministry of Tourism. So we thought of that. She's also an artist and she's going to end us with a poem. Thank you. In which language?
Okans, and at the end, I will explain what it means. Nice. Gantangifi, which means thank you very much. Santo Vianoma, we Janumae. Oh, aye, oh, aye. Anumarede, Anumawe Kibaka, oh. Santo Vianoma, we Janumae. Misama na misama. Misama na samadi aba liba fuliba fudo pededeti de. Dai funa no fosi yo konta kiyo si misama eke sama dam yo sama samai. Bikami sama na samadi fiti heitapu kounu pikinga fu pete den komopu. Misama na sama di sabiden sefi. Weika misa dansi pedong nena misama. Anabisi pe yumiti misama yumuteli taki dena sama. Bikami sama pasa wata fu wata. If na yubi abi futaki misama abiode asama di dende. Dami wani begi angalesi peki fika misama meke dende de sama di demude. Santo Vianoma we janumae. Oh aye, oh aye. Anuma dede, anuma we kibaka oh. Santo Vianoma we janumae. So the first part of it is about the bird who protects her child. That's the singing part. And the part where I'm speaking, I'm talking about my people. My people are people who are already from pureness. My people are people who are rich. And my people are people who are kings and queens. The way they dress, the way they dance, the way they move. So if it's now that you want to explain to my people how they should behave and how they should move around, I will cuss you out. Because my people are the example of how you can pass through everything possible and still be very powerful people. So that's what the poem is about. And as a thank you note, this is in Suriname called the Pangi. We call it a Pangi, and this is handmade by the woman in Suriname, and you see different things they use. This is, for example, siksiki. It's a musical instrument. You see a pot, you see a knife, a pot to cook, not just food, but to boil stuff to make medicine. So different elements of Surinamese maroons are presented in this Pangi. So all of the presenters, when they started their presentation, they said, we are thanking the ambassador. As a maroon, we thank at the end so that when I give the thank yous, you can give me some of it back. So this Pangi is worn like the way I wear this one. So it's worn like a skirt. But when people get older and elder, what we do is you use Pangis to wrap them and to pray for them and for them to get as old as possible. In Suriname, we say, get as so old that we will have to pick you up and put you in the sun. So we need you. We want you. We're grateful for you. And that's why I brought this Pangi. So when you're going to the meetings, you can wear it like the skirt. But for today, symbolically, yes, I do. And this also on behalf of the first Maroon to become Vice President in Suriname, His Excellency Ronnie Brunswijk. Gansangifi, Gansangifi, Gansangifi.
Thank you all very much. I hope you here and you online have enjoyed this. I am very happy that my friends said yes, and we will continue. So next time you have this conference, we'll be back with part 2. And all right, probably having sailed already. All right, thank you so much. Right.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Although I thought you mentioned that the Central Fianoma is also in Ghanaian songs. So that, yeah, the first part. I hope that you have a discussion about the Central Fianoma, because that part sounded quite key, because there is a Central Fianoma song in Ghana. So I hope you have discussion over that later today.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the officiants. I mean, isn't it heartwarming? I mean, I felt the goosebumps on me when she mentioned Central Fianoma. I was like, that's my language, right? Like, how? That is marvelous. We can do it. Put your hands together for them, please. It's been amazing. It's been amazing. So at this moment, we would also be taken by that same thrill for a very, very, very revealing and insightful documentary by Ni Kwate O, an academic and international filmmaker, in a documentary called You Hide Me. Let's do this.
Amen. Amen. Tamanyaba, 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 tamanyaba. Oh say ye, oh say ye, oh say ye, aye. Oh say ye, oh say ye, oh say ye, oh say ye, aye. Oh say ye.
This is the basement of the British Museum. This is where they keep their vast collections of African art, tools, furniture, musical instruments, and clothes. We are going to have a look at what they have in their collections. Similar collections can be found in museums in all former colonial powers in Europe and America. The main part of these collections was acquired during the period of colonial rule. The objects were brought back to Europe by officers, tradesmen, missionaries, and the colonial specialists called ethnographers. On the whole, the collections represent the looting of a conquering army. When the British Expeditionary Force sacked the city of Benin in 1897, they took with them more than 3,000 pieces of art. Many of them are still locked away and kept in these boxes and plastic bags in these rooms. Ethnographers were sent to the colonies to collect any kind of art or objects made by the Africans. The Europeans never brought with them their own works of art to Africa. No European artist at that time seemed to have gone to Africa to learn about African art. Why did the colonizers bring back to Europe the stool of a chief, a statue used for worship, an ancestor's image, a pipe with tobacco still in it, a comb, a vessel to contain food? During the long period of the European slave trade in Africa, there was little interest in African art. The Europeans began collecting art objects when their presence changed from slave trading to direct colonial administration. The colonizers established regimes in Africa to suit the particular role the colonies played in their own economies. The colonizers' attitude to African civilization stems from this basic aim. To establish their rule in the colonies, they made an all-out attack on African civilization, social structure, religion, language, and art. In cultural and social affairs, a particular tactic was employed by the colonizers. Certain types of social and cultural life were encouraged, but only after they had been reduced to a stage where they could be controlled. After the power of the kings and the chiefs had been broken, some were reinstated by the colonial administration to be used by them. After an all-out attack on African religion, some ceremonies were allowed to continue to preserve an African facade. This is the tactic of destroying a civilization from within, like the tactics of brainwashing. The tactic was to destroy the civilization they found, to brainwash Africans into believing that their own civilization is inferior, whilst at the same time insisting on preserving an African facade in the countries they ruled. What was the purpose of the ethnographic collections in Europe? These ethnographic collections were displayed in such a way so as to establish a cultural hierarchy. Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Assyrian objects were given prominent places in their museums, whereas objects from Africa were crammed into small rooms or hidden away. The purpose of the ethnographic collections was to establish for the white man which is the higher civilization and which are the primitive ones. The ethnographic collections were used in the ideology of colonialism, which talks about backward races and primitive civilizations. This is why the colonizers bothered to collect and preserve material from a civilization they set about to destroy. The colonizers did not collect this material in order to study, understand, and appreciate the civilization they encountered. The colonizers did not try to understand African civilization, but dismissed what they saw as something that was of no intrinsic value. The material they collected in Africa was used as propaganda material against Africans and people of African descent. Now that they have discovered that this material speaks for Africa, they cling on to it and try once more to use it to their own advantage. After African countries had achieved independence, the former colonial powers changed their tone when they talk about African civilization. Not long ago, they talked about the colonized as backward races with primitive civilizations. Now, they talk about the masterpieces of African art. Not long ago, they lectured to Africans about European civilizations. Now they talk about Benin bronzes and Ife sculptures. Not long ago, it was fashionable to suppose that before the Europeans came, Africa had no history. Now, African history is taught in Europe and America. Not long ago, creative activity among the colonized was discouraged and looked upon with suspicion. And now, exhibitions of contemporary African art are arranged in Europe and America. Suddenly, the former colonial powers have changed their tone. However, their change of tone and their rehabilitation of African art are suspect. First, they destroy a civilization and condemn it as primitive and non-human. Then they rehabilitate certain parts of it as examples of high civilization. They refuse to understand African civilization. Then they present themselves as the experts on the subject and decide which are the masterpieces of African art, which is now becoming a very profitable business in Europe and America. The European attitude of today resembles the attitude of the colonizers, who decided which customs and traditions should be allowed to continue. Because Europe and the United States have the most important collections of objects of art from Africa, they can feed back to Africa a certain image of what is traditional African art. Today, the advanced industrial countries need an African middle class that is orientated towards the West. And they find it necessary to distinguish between Africans, between the higher and the lower classes. The image of African art that they feed back to Africa is meant for the African middle class. The Western theorists and so-called experts on African civilization depend on what kind of African society the advanced industrial countries need. They hardly ever say how these objects were acquired, from whom, or what they gave in return. They never say how many objects were burnt by their missionaries and destroyed by their armies. They know that museums in Africa have very little to show of their past. They say that the material is more easily accessible in Europe, but accessible to whom? Many books on African art are being published in Europe and America, but these books cannot replace the material that is now being kept outside Africa. Why should Africans, including African artists, only be able to read about their own works of art in books written by white people? How can the government of independent African states explain to the generation that is now growing up that they can't see their cultural heritage in their own countries? We, the people of Africa and of African descent, demand that our works of art, which embodies our history, our civilization, our religion, and culture, should immediately and unconditionally be returned to us.
There we go with another legendary piece. Put your hands together for Nikwate for his very special You Hide Me documentary. And this is where we all share our views. Not long ago, we had a very captivating session with Her Excellency and Priscilla, Alexandra, Carolina, and also Emmanuel sharing the great insights and the linkage between Africans here in diaspora as well. And we just watched this about how African artifacts found their ways in the diaspora. The diaspora. So we'll pass the microphone around. What you saw in the Nikwate documentary, You Hide Me, how did you feel? What has been the new insight? Share with us. Share with us. Okay.
Oh, well, my name is Andrews Ajimfrantite. I'm speechless because this film has really brought out my emotions, my patriotic, I don't want to say nationalistic emotions, but my African emotions, because basically all these artifacts we see in Europe, they were obtained by what we call by today's standards, war crimes. They were obtained through atrocities visited on our ancestors. We have a very patriotic African in our Ni Kwate O. He is still around, he is still alive. He can read, he can write. He has not reached the stage where, God forbid, we will say he's trying to leave us. So what I would like to say is that let us use some of these forums and institutions that organize these events to establish something for him. Why don't we have the Nikwate Owu Institute for something or something, where we have a whole collection of his works to educate our youth? Because this should be watched by every African from the grassroots, from our children. You see, it is good to organize this at our level as adults, but let us have some of these things at the basic school levels for people to see what really happened to us and what we can do to stop. Because the mistakes we made, that led to some of these things being taken away from us. And we are ready and paying dollars to go and watch in somebody's country. They are still ongoing. People are still doing it. We have a lot of cultural sites. Our cultural heritage is still being given away for personal profit, spearheaded by institutions that should know better. I don't want to name names, even though I could, if provoked. Anyway, I want to appeal to you. Let us find a way of properly settling Nikwateu, because this is not the first of his films that I've watched. They contain something that should be, should be cherished and enshrined in the body politic, in our culture, locally and internationally, as Africans. Well, a word to the wise is enough. This was a word to the...
Hand up. So we've been hidden deliberately, isn't it?
Well, I have a presentation to make, so I don't have a comment now. But the issue is that anytime I watch it, it brings back a lot of fresh memories. So it's something, as Professor Jimfra said, every individual needs to watch it. And I don't think it's only Africans that need to watch it. It needs to be watched by the whole world so that we know collectively what happened to a section of us and do the right thing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a brief comment. Thank you all for your kind words of encouragement. First of all, I would like to congratulate June Giovanni and Imru Bakari of the Pan-African Cinema Archive in the UK, in London, because they were the ones who took the initiative 50 years later to commemorate and to celebrate the 50th anniversary of You Hide Me by organizing 3 very powerful webinars that involve over 800 participants, on different occasions. And to that, I'm very, very grateful. And then also, I want to also, show my gratitude to UNESCO, His Excellency Abdul Rahmani Diallo, who was very, very instrumental in organizing a webinar between myself and a few colleagues to discuss the way forward, because I've heard some suggestions as to what
could be done after the movie. So I have a dream. I have a dream. Me too, I have a dream. And my dream is to decolonize You Hide Me from the English language and bring it down to the indigenous African language narrations, to organize, produce narrations beginning with Ghana, Hausa, Twi, Ewe, and Ghana, and so on and so forth. And not only in Ghana, but I want to move beyond Ghana with the help and support of UNESCO to do a Yoruba version, an Igbo version, and carry on Zulu version, Xhosa version, and hey, let's run and let's go for it. Thank you.
Only thing I wanted to point out, except from the fact that our history is sometimes locked up and we can't even get to it. One of the things I saw was one of the statues. It looked like it had holes around the mouth, and it brought me in mind my grandmother, because that's what we called maroon tattoos, and we call it kokoti. And when she passed, she had that what we as youngsters called maroon tattoo. She had something like that. So if I never knew I was from Africa, seeing that, I would think, hey, this is something grandma had, so I have a connection. So sometimes it's just seeing it, which makes a lot of difference in knowing what we have and where we come from.
And just as there was an acknowledgement made earlier for His Excellency Abdurrahman Diallo, and he is with us with his hand up on Zoom. His Excellency, let's hear from you on your remarks.
Okay, good afternoon all. Firstly, I wish to apologize. I haven't been able to follow the sessions. I thought I could be able to be there at 12, but I had a meeting here with the Minister of Communication. So, I wanted to intervene here. Yes, I was screening the movie again, seeing the movie You Hide Me, and I just wanted to intervene again, to appreciate once again the work of Nikwate and thank him for this this gift that he made through this a beautiful production, which is a school of learning, and it's still used in a lot of documentary worldwide. We remember last June, the famous researcher Benedict Savoy, the one who produced the report that the French President Emmanuel Macron asked, on the restitutions with Fermin Sarr from Senegal. Benedict Savoy was here at UG, at University of Ghana, for a lecture, and she reminded about the importance of this documentary, how it tells about on the agenda of the stolen art cultural objects. So we made a promise to Nikwate to support him in the dissemination of this documentary on local languages, really, so that the Ghanaian first here and other Africans speaking some of the regional languages that are spoken here, such as Hausa, or can size and enjoy and understand, I would say, the magnitude of this issue. So just to express again our availability, and as promised, we will come on it and support you for that. I wanted to share also that recently this documentary also was screened in Cotonou, Benin, where the country has retrieved the welcome